I'm 33, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of person who doesn't stick their nose in anyone else's business, especially family. You learn early on that getting too involved just invites drama, but that all changed last summer when my brother's wife, Mel, disappeared. We were just back from a family trip, the kind we'd been doing once every few years, cabin in the mountains, no cell service, board games, campfires. It was one of those places that looks like a postcard, but has just enough isolation to feel eerie. There were 10 of us, me, my parents, my brother Eric, Mel, and a few cousins. The whole trip had been pretty normal. Mel seemed a little off, maybe tired, but no one thought much of it. She still laughed at our dad's dumb jokes, still helped clean up after meals. If something was wrong, she didn't show it. Not until the last morning. Eric claimed she went for a walk and never came back, just like that. No note, no phone, nothing missing from her luggage. He said she took a mug of coffee and walked out to get some air before we packed up. We waited hours before we called the police, assuming she'd wandered a little too far and gotten lost. They searched the area for 3 days. No tracks, no witnesses, no body. Just an empty mug found about a mile away in the woods, set neatly on a moss-covered rock, like she'd placed it there intentionally. The search eventually stopped, and the news stories dried up. Eric was devastated, or at least that's what he looked like. He cried in front of our parents, gave interviews begging for her return, wore her wedding ring on a chain around his neck. But I knew my brother, and something about the way he answered questions, or didn't, sat wrong with me. Still, I stayed quiet. That is, until I got the first email. It came exactly 7 days after she vanished. The subject line just said, "I'm not missing," and it was from Mel's email address. I stared at the screen for a solid minute without moving. The sender said, Melissa H., and the email address matched the one she'd used for years. But that subject line, "I'm not missing," felt like a punch to the chest. At first, I assumed it was some kind of sick joke. Maybe someone hacked her account. Or worse, maybe Eric was playing some twisted game. But then I opened it. No greeting, no explanation. Just one line. "He thinks I'm dead. Let him think that. Don't tell anyone I wrote you." My hands were shaking as I read it again. There was no signature, no details about where she was, and no mention of what had actually happened that morning in the woods. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I didn't even know if I should. If someone was watching her account, or if this was a trap, replying could have blown everything up. So I just stared at the screen for hours, trying to make sense of it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face from that last day, smiling politely at breakfast, brushing her hair behind her ear like she always did when she was anxious. I kept checking the inbox every hour, for days. Then, a week later, another message came. Again, no greeting, no subject line this time. Just, "He lied about what happened that morning. It wasn't a walk. I left on purpose." That's when I realized this wasn't a prank. Mel was alive. She had left willingly, and whatever story Eric had told us about her going for a walk was complete BS. The problem was, if Mel was safe, why was she hiding? Why come to me of all people? Why not her sister or her best friend? I hadn't even been that close to her. We got along fine, but we didn't talk outside of family events. I didn't understand what was going on. But one thing was suddenly, painfully clear. Eric was lying, and I was now the only person who knew it. I didn't confront Eric, not yet. Every instinct in me screamed to call him, to demand answers, to throw that email in his face. But something held me back. Maybe it was the tone in Mel's messages. Short, urgent, almost scared. She didn't say, "Don't tell Eric." She said, "Don't tell anyone." So I waited. I started paying closer attention to Eric, his routines, his calls, how he acted around people. We live in the same city, just 20 minutes apart, and before Mel disappeared, we saw each other almost weekly. After, he pulled away a little, but we still met up for coffee, usually when our mom pushed us into it. At first, he looked like someone genuinely grieving, distracted, quiet, but the more I watched him, the more cracks I saw, like how he never talked about Mel unless someone else brought her up, how he never visited the cabin area after the search ended, how he seemed a little too eager to move forward, as he called it, even within a month of her being gone. And then there was the woman. He never said anything, but I saw her once, at a restaurant near his place. Blonde, mid-30s, laughing way too hard at something Eric said. They were sitting close. Like, close. I didn't confront him then either. Instead, I went home and pulled up Mel's old social media. Everything was still active. Instagram, Facebook, even Pinterest. But there hadn't been a single new post since the trip, not even a missing up. Either she was being very careful, or someone else had access to those accounts and froze them to things looking legit. And then, 2 days later, "He's not who you think he is." I didn't find that out until it was almost too late. That line haunted me, because whatever Eric had done, it wasn't just about some fight, failed marriage. Mel wasn't just, she was running from. I was starting to believe she wasn't the person in. I started digging, not the kind of digging you through someone's Instagram likes or Facebook, public records, property history, background. I figured if Mel was scared enough to fake her own disappearance, there had to be something. A police report. a sealed case, anything that hinted at what she was running from. But Eric's record was clean. Too clean. No speeding tickets, no calls to the police, not even a parking violation. Except that wasn't exactly true. I stumbled across a traffic violation from 2 years ago. Something minor, just a citation for a broken taillight. But the address listed on it wasn't the apartment he shared with Mel. It was a house, in a totally different part of town. A house I'd never heard of. And when I checked the ownership record, it wasn't in Eric's name. It was in hers. Melissa Harper. Bought in full. No mortgage. 6 months before the wedding. That made no sense. They were living in an apartment together up until the trip, always complaining about how expensive it was to buy in our area. They'd talked about saving for a down payment. Mel never mentioned already owning a place, so I drove out there. I don't even know what I was expecting. Maybe an abandoned place. Maybe someone else living there. But what I saw chilled me more than anything so far. The windows were boarded up from the inside. The yard was completely overgrown. Mail was overflowing from the box, but only addressed to Mel. None to Eric. None to anyone else. The house looked frozen in time, like someone had vanished mid-move and just left everything. I walked up to the front door, still not sure what I was doing, and that's when I saw it. Scratched into the wood, faint but unmistakable, were 5 letters, barely visible unless you looked closely. Help. That's when I knew. Mel wasn't hiding from Eric because of some petty argument or emotional fallout. She had been planning this escape for a long time and somehow tried to leave clues. I couldn't sleep that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that word, help, etched into the door like a scream that no one had heard. Mel bought that house in her name, hid it from everyone, and then vanished. This wasn't just a runaway bride story. This was calculated, desperate, and Eric? He'd never said a word about it. The next morning I called in sick to work and drove back to the house with a crowbar. I know how that sounds. But something in my gut told me the truth wasn't going to come politely. If Mel wanted me to see something, it would be inside. The back door was easier. Half-rotted, locked with a cheap padlock that gave after a few hits. The air inside was stale, like no one had opened a window in months. Dust hung in beams of light from cracks in the boards. The place wasn't fully furnished, just a table, a few boxes, a mattress on the floor. No pictures, no electronics, no personal touches. But it wasn't abandoned either. It looked like someone had started to move in, then stopped. I opened one of the boxes by the wall. Inside were clothes, Mel's clothes, folded neatly, a sweater I'd seen her wear on the trip, a pair of sneakers she practically lived in, but everything looked almost staged. Then I found the notebook. It was stuffed under the mattress, warped from what looked like water damage. I flipped it open and instantly recognized her handwriting, sharp, quick, always slanting to the right. There weren't entries, not in the traditional sense, just dates, notes, fragments. 3 a.m. again, watching me sleep. Why did he put a tracker on? Said if I ever left, he'd make sure no. Recording the fights now, just in case. Start moving things to the house. 1 box at a time. My hands were trembling. I flipped to the last page. It was almost empty. Just a single line, written hastily and in all caps. If you find this, don't trust him. I backed out of the house slowly, heart racing. There was no doubt in my. Mel had been terrified of Eric, and now she was reaching out to me, the one person Eric wouldn't suspect. The question was, why me? I kept the notebook, hid it in my car under the spare tire compartment. I didn't know what to do with it yet, but I knew I couldn't leave it there. If Eric had ever been to that house, or if he suspected someone might go snooping, I couldn't risk him finding it. That night, I got another email. No subject, no greeting, just 2 lines. I know you found the house. Be careful. He checks everything. I froze. How did she know? There were no cameras, no signs of surveillance. Had she been nearby? Watching? Was she the one who scratched help into the door and waited to see if anyone would notice? I started wondering if she was close, in town, hiding in plain sight. The idea made my stomach twist with something I couldn't quite name, fear or adrenaline or both. Then I made a mistake. I replied. I told her I found the notebook. I told her I believed her. I told her she wasn't alone. I sent it before I could talk myself out of it, and almost immediately I regretted it, because 2 hours later Eric called me. His voice was calm, too calm, like he was trying not to sound like something was wrong. He said he was just checking in, wanted to hang out this weekend, maybe grill at his place like we used to. But then he said something that chilled me. He asked, "You been out by the old Fairview neighborhood lately?" Drove by earlier and saw someone that looked like you. Fairview. That's where the house was. I played dumb, said no, hadn't been out that way in years. He paused just for a second, then said, "Weird. Guess I was mistaken." I hung up soon after, heart thudding like a drum in my chest. Eric knew. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. The way he asked about that neighborhood, he was fishing, testing me, and I had taken the bait. Now I was in it. Really in it. Whatever Mel had run from, I was officially standing in the middle of it now. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in my apartment sounded like a key turning in the door. I kept checking the peephole. I turned off all the lights and sat by the window, watching the street, half expecting Eric to pull up. But he never did. Instead, the next day, I got a text from an unknown number. No name, no context. "If he finds out you have it, you'll be next." That was all it said. No doubt in my mind, it was from Mel. The writing style matched, and I knew exactly what it was. The notebook. I had already hidden it at work, tucked behind the ceiling tiles in the back supply closet. I figured Eric wouldn't think to look there, if it even got that far. But that message told me Mel was watching. She knew what was happening almost in real time. Either she had eyes on me, or she had someone feeding her information. That thought terrified me even more. Because if someone else was helping her, that meant this went deeper than just a bad marriage. She wasn't just escaping Eric. She was building something, planning. I decided to go back to the house one last time. I waited until dark, parked 2 blocks away, walked through backyards just to be sure I wasn't being followed. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe some clue she left behind. Maybe even Mel herself. But the moment I stepped onto the back porch, I knew I wasn't alone. The kitchen light was on. Someone was inside. And as I crept around the side window trying to see who it was, I caught a glimpse of a shadow moving across the living room. Not Mel. Eric. He had found the house. He had keys. And from the way he moved, calm, confident, familiar, this wasn't his first time here, which meant everything he'd told us after the trip had been a lie. He knew about the house. He knew she'd prepared to leave, and now, with her gone, he was coming back here. Why? To clean it out? To erase whatever was left? Or worse, was this where he thought she'd be hiding? I didn't stick around to find. I slipped away through the neighbor's yard and drove straight home, heart pounding the whole time. Mel had been planning her escape for months. But Eric, he'd been tracking it the entire time. I called out of work the next day. I couldn't focus, couldn't think. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and every time my phone buzzed, I jumped like it might explode. I knew now that Eric was playing a much deeper game than anyone realized. He hadn't just lost his wife. He had been hunting her, and now, whether I wanted to or not, I was caught in the middle. Late that afternoon, I got another email. This one longer than the others. No subject line. Just a wall of text. He knows about the house. He found it once before I left. That's why I ran. The plan was never to disappear completely, but I needed time. I didn't think he'd go looking for you. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pulled you into this. But I didn't have anyone else I could trust. I've been watching, just in case. That notebook, if he saw it, he'll never stop. You need to be smart. Don't go back there again. He's already paranoid. And then, at the bottom, I'm not hiding forever. I have proof, but if I show my face now, he'll make me disappear for real. You have to hold on to that notebook. It's the only thing keeping the truth alive. I read it twice, then a third time. She was alive. She was watching. And more importantly, she had a plan. But if Mel really had proof, where was it? What else had she been hiding? The notebook was terrifying, yes, but not legally useful. No names, no specifics. It was her word against his. I needed something more. So I went back through her emails. I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Each one had been sent from a different IP address. Different states even. She was bouncing around, maybe using public Wi-Fi or burner laptops. Every email came from a new trail. She was covering her tracks better than anyone I'd ever seen. Except one. The third message came from a small town 2 hours north, Lake Hill. I remembered the name because it used to be the halfway point for our family road trips as kids. One gas station, one diner, and a cheap little inn with green shutters. I Googled it. The motel still existed. Then I checked the timestamp. That message had been sent 2 days after she vanished. She was there, right after the trip. Maybe she'd left something behind. Clue, journal, even footage. Something told me if Mel had been that close to home after escaping, she left something in Lake Hill. Something she wanted me to find. And if Eric figured that out before I did, he wouldn't just be hunting Mel anymore. He'd be coming for me. I drove to Lake Hill just after midnight. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I turned off my phone's location, took cash from an ATM 2 towns over, and drove with my headlights off through the last mile. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being careful. Because by now, I knew the kind of person Eric really was. And I was beginning to understand how far he'd go to protect whatever secret Mel had been ready to expose. The town hadn't changed much. Still, just the gas station, the diner, and that small roadside inn with the green shutters peeling in the corners. I parked behind it, heart pounding, and walked up to the night window. The guy at the desk barely looked up when I asked if someone named Melissa H. had checked in 2 months ago. He just shrugged and said records that old were probably in the back office, but he wasn't allowed to let anyone look, so I slipped him a 50. 10 minutes later, I was inside room 6, standing in the dark with nothing but the flashlight on my phone and the kind of dread that settles in your chest like a stone. The room was dusty. long abandoned, like no one had stayed in it since. But tucked behind the mini fridge, taped flat against the wall, was a plastic bag. Inside were two things, a flash drive and a letter. Folded in half, the handwriting was hers. If you found this, you already know everything. This is the proof, but you have to decide what to do with it. If I go public, he'll come for me. He's already done things no one would believe. I can't outrun him forever. But if you share this, you won't be safe either. The truth is yours now. Just know what it's going to cost. That was it. I didn't open the drive then. I couldn't. I was shaking too hard. I stuffed it deep in my bag and got out of there fast, driving through the night with every headlight behind me, making my pulse spike. I got home at 4:12 a.m., slept an hour. Then I opened the drive. There were 4 folders. One was labeled audio, another, legal docs, a third, photos, and the last one, emergency, play first. So I did. It was a video file, grainy, shot from a phone, hidden based on the angle. It showed Eric, standing in the hallway of their apartment, yelling. But it wasn't the yelling that froze me. It was the words. No one's going to believe. You think they'll take your side over mine? You try anything and I swear to God you'll just disappear, like you never existed. I sat there in silence as the screen faded to black. Mel wasn't being dramatic. She was surviving, and now I had evidence. Real, dangerous, damning evidence. The question was, what was I going to do with it? Because something told me, the second I moved, Eric would know. I didn't go. I knew better. My brother had friends in the department, in legal circles, even in his public face was spotless, successful, charming, generous. No one would look at Eric and see a threat. They'd see a grieving husband, a family man, not the monster I now knew he was. So I made a plan. First, I backed up everything on the flash drive. Twice. One copy hidden in my apartment. The second, I mailed it, anonymous return address, to a lawyer for another state, someone who owed me a favor and wouldn't ask questions. I just wrote, open only if something happens to me. Then I emailed Mel. I have the drive. I believe you. I'm not going to wait anymore. She responded almost instantly. Then you need to be gone before he finds out. He'll know. He always knows. Too late, because less than 24 hours later, Eric showed up at my door. I didn't let him in. He was calm at first, asking if I wanted to grab lunch, maybe catch up. Said he felt like we hadn't been close lately. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I told him I was busy, that I couldn't talk. Then he leaned closer, voice low. Cold. Been to Lake Hill recently? My blood went cold. I didn't answer. Didn't flinch. He stared at me, waiting for a reaction. When I didn't give him one, he stepped back, smiled again, fake, rehearsed, and said, let me know if you hear anything about Mel. I still miss her, you know. And then he left. I knew I had hours, maybe less. So I ran, left town, went off-grid, used cash only, bought a burner phone, wiped all traces of my digital life. I didn't tell anyone, not even my parents. They wouldn't understand. Worse, they might tell him. But before I left, I scheduled one last email. It went out automatically 36 hours later, to every local news outlet, to the police, to Mel's old friends, to lawyers, to everyone. The email included a public link to the drive's contents, the video, the audio, the threats, the documents that proved Mel had been hiding money in a private account because she'd been preparing to flee from an abuser. Within 12 hours, it was everywhere. The story exploded. Grieving husband exposed after wife's secret evidence surfaces. Eric's world unraveled fast. Investigations launched. Journalists swarmed. His business partners dropped him. Sponsors pulled out. And most importantly, people started to believe her. Mel still didn't come forward. Not publicly. But I heard from her one last time. A short message. You gave me my life back. Thank you. Don't come looking. I'll be okay now. That was 3 months ago. I'm still in hiding, technically. Not because I'm afraid, but because I know how people like Eric operate. Just because he's cornered doesn't mean he's finished. He's the kind who doesn't take defeat well. But I sleep better now, because the truth is out. And Mel? She's finally free. So maybe I lost my brother, but I helped someone escape the kind of darkness that swallows people whole. And if I had to choose again, I'd make the same call. Every single time.